Neptune Reef here. I've never done a YouTube video on saltwater saltwater life and the saltwater hobby itself. But I started a new tank. Just the hair, you can see it behind me, 110-gallon saltwater aquarium. As you can see on this side right here, I've got some old live rock from one of my old systems, and then right here I've got some new dry rock that I epoxied together, and I've built a pretty solid platform behind me. Should be good for mounting different corals, depending on how I want to build this tank out. I've got some lower rocks for kind of your more soft corals, and obviously if you want to do your hard corals, you can do them up on the top where they get more light. But I wanted to kind of do this video because I've seen a lot of it, doing my new tank, I started looking on YouTube, getting ideas of how I want to upgrade my system. I started out 7 years ago with a 55-gallon tank. It was a freshwater tank that I converted over to saltwater. I don't drill the backs of my tanks. I buy the overflow boxes. There was an old school overflow box. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it basically had the vacuum on the top where like your return and your actual inlet was kind of one box, and it was pretty nice. Like, it worked good for me. I know people have problems about your overflow being on one side and then your return being on another, which I did on this tank. I did separate it out. But just getting into the hobby, getting my feet wet, that was something that I did, and it did work. Yeah, it worked well. Like I said, I've been in this hobby 7 years. I came from the freshwater world. Growing up, my dad kept freshwater fish, and I thought that's what I would do until I married my wife, who kept saltwater fish. And she had a 35-gallon tank at the time and had bought a 55-gallon tank when we got married and said, let's do saltwater. And I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. But anyways, I went ahead and I started doing it, and it was fun. Like, I really enjoyed the saltwater fish. They're really beautiful. The rock is beautiful. Everything about saltwater is really beautiful. It's peaceful. It's really a great hobby to be in if you're going to stick with it. But I wanted to give just a couple of tips, kind of in my experience through the past 7 years of doing this hobby. A lot of the mistakes that I made along the way. First was probably starting out with too small of a tank. Your parameter shifts can be quite brutal in a small tank. It's hard to control large sways, and like it can go up and down depending on your nitrates, whatever you're testing. It's hard to keep everything perfect. You can overdose your tank, underdose your tank. Just having a bigger tank, I had a lot of guys tell me when I was first starting out at different stores, telling me that I needed to get a bigger tank, which I wish I had done. Finally, I'm doing it. After a couple years of extreme die-offs, I kept what was able to be kept in my 55-gallon, and I stopped trying to put things that really needed a 180-gallon tank to survive. And that's kind of one of the things you learn. Really, one of the biggest things is don't impulse buy. Also, like when you go to a store, it's really easy to like walk out of there with 10 things. That's a really bad idea. You don't try to put 10 things in your tank at one time, especially if you've got a brand new tank. That just overloads your tank, and if you're trying to keep perfect parameters and you really have not a lot of bacteria in there, something bad is going to grow in there, and it's going to go really, really fast, and it's going to kill everything in your tank, and you're going to leave the hobby. So if you're doing it, just buy, if you want clownfish and you get 2, that's fine. You can start out with 2. But really, when you go to the store and come home, especially with how much stuff costs, come home with 1 fish. Take care of that fish. That's probably the best advice that I could give. Don't come home with 10 fish. Don't come home with 10 different fish that you're going to have to deal with, and hopefully they don't die and they don't all get stressed out from each other. Quarantining is good. You can definitely bring stuff home from your store I would quarantine for 4 to 6 weeks. One of the stores that I work with, they actually do that. You can find good stores that will quarantine for a while. And once you get to know them and know your relationship with them, you know you're buying good fish. But not every single store that says they quarantine actually quarantine. And you can put bad stuff into your tank. So if it's a store that you don't trust, it's probably best to just get a little 10-gallon tank, look at some videos of how to do it, put a UV sterilizer on the back of it with a little filtration system, and just keep them in there for a couple weeks and just monitor them. Keep your levels that reflect what your tank is, whether that's 0.25 or whatever your salinity is, and just watch them. And then after so many weeks of watching them, then you can put them into your tank and it should be okay. But it's a bad idea. I mean, think about it. You're spending a lot of money on this hobby. You probably, if you've got $500 worth of fish in your tank, you got 3 fish and it's worth $500. You don't want to kill them. That's really expensive. And the fish that you brought home, that's probably $100. You don't want to kill them. You want them all to live. That brings me to my third point, which is buying really bad equipment. Don't buy really bad equipment. I mean, I get saving money and I understand it, but you're putting really expensive stuff into your tank. This is an expensive hobby. It's a beautiful hobby, but it's an expensive hobby. And I had a lot of times throughout my years where I spent thousands of dollars on fish that are all dead. By the time you add up all the different fish you bought, and you bought that rare Picula or Octilius, whatever, live clownfish for $170, and you come home and you killed it, that's kind of discouraging. And I suck with all the names and everything, but I've pretty much had every type of fish that you can buy for the most part that's reef safe or semi-reef safe. And you got to be careful, especially if your tank is too small. You don't want to put like certain fish into too small of an environment. When they're small, you can maybe get away with it, but they won't be happy, and they may not eat and they may die. And then when you have a fish that dies, that creates bad spikes and stuff. So for whatever your hunger is, whatever kind of fish you want to put in, size your tank, get decent equipment. When I first started, I always had really cheap pumps, $19 wave maker that you buy online, some cheap stuff. Finally, I went ahead and I'm not breaking the bank, but I got some high doors. I'm only running one right now as I'm cycling this tank, but I'm eventually going to have 4, and I'm going to have different stream patterns, and I'll put them on timers, and it'll create different flows and stuff for the fish as I set up this tank. But I'm going to move really slow with this tank. Like I said, I've done this for a couple of years now, and I kind of know I've had a lot of bumps and bruises along the way. And so I've learned, take it slow. Don't go and impulse buy. Like I said, it's really easy to go and buy 10 fish. So easy. So they're so beautiful. They're sitting right there, and you just have all these ideas. And next thing you know, you're coming home with $300-400 worth of fish and $100 worth of coral. You're putting it all in there, and you cause a lot of problems for your tank, for yourself, and it's going to make you want to get out of the hobby. So just control yourself when you go to the store, buy things. Another thing too, and I think I might have mentioned this, but keeping your tank too clean. We're all really stressed out about parameters and stuff. There's nothing wrong with keeping solid, stable parameters. I've seen different things work for different people. Some people do a 10% change and swear by they do a 10% change every week and a 50% change every month, and then other people do a 5-gallon change on a big tank, and they replenish some of their salt and those good nutrients that you can get when you mix your salt in with your fresh water, which always use RO water. Do not use tap water, by the way. Don't do it. Don't do it. Go to CVS, go to Walgreens, go to wherever, find a water purifier place and get water from there if you don't want to put your own RO system in. Do not use water from the tap. Do not do it. You will cause yourself a ton of problems. I've done it. So, but yeah, so those are just kind of different things. I'm gonna show you on my next video what I did with this tank. I built it all by myself. This was all pretty much used except for like my lower equipment. It's all brand new, or what I pulled off of my old system. But this 110 gallon tank behind me is used. It's a couple years old. It was from a freshwater system, and I've converted it over, and you see what you see behind me. I do have like little submarine things and stuff in my saltwater tank. It's kind of weird, but I've got kids and they like that crap. So that's what I put in my tank. I don't have any problem with it. I know that it won't look like other reef tanks out there, but that's the beautiful thing of this hobby. You can make it to suit you. And my kids love saltwater fish. They loved all the fish that we had in our previous tank. And I look forward to building this tank and seeing where it goes. Anyways, thanks for watching, and have a good day.